Former New York Times executive editor Jill Abramson has a new book out, and the early reviews of Merchants of Truth have been glowing. But the book also has some issues, and they're not helping Abramson's reputation. Adam Riley has more.
In Merchants of Truth, Jill Abramson praises old-school journalistic values and pans new habits like Twitter.
If you look at what a Washington Post reporter writes in their stories and compare it to their tweets, like there's nothing measured about the tweets.
She's also ambivalent about new outlets like BuzzFeed and Vice.
When I started reporting this book, BuzzFeed and Vice were the new digital darlings. The new shiny stars are struggling now and cutting jobs.
But before the book was published, Abramson took heat for mistakes in the galleys, like a claim that then Vice correspondent Danny Gold refused protective clothing while reporting on Ebola. Gold called this a straight-up lie.
There are certain areas that you can't do.
Yeah, I mean, we have PPE suits if you need us to put those on.
Add to that, Abramson told The Cut she doesn't record interviews because she's a very fast note-taker with an almost photographic memory. Now she's been accused of plagiarism by Vice's Michael Moynihan, who offered 6 separate examples. Pressed on that, Abramson was dismissive.
The paragraphs are very similar in your writing. Do you have any comment on this? Do you think this is a footnote issue?
No, I don't think it's an issue at all.
But she's since changed her tune, telling the Washington Post the language is too close in some cases and should have been cited as quotations in the text. This will be fixed. Given the book's title, they don't really have a choice.
Dan, you've written books. I don't see how a book gets this far with things like that that were so blatant. They look like cut and paste mistakes to me, that she didn't, I don't know if she didn't footnote or she didn't accurately, just attribute it, but how does it get that far?
Well, it's plagiarism. Let's be clear about that. I've written 3 books, and I've never written for a huge publisher like Simon & Schuster, so maybe it's a little bit different. But my experience is you sign an agreement that the work is original and there's no plagiarism, and after that, you're pretty much on your own. There's a lot less editing and fact-checking that goes into writing a book than people would imagine.
But aren't there so many pieces of technology out there where you can run, transcripts through, and it can alert
Especially
you if
quotes.
there's some. Yeah, I would think if something appeared in a publication somewhere that it would have flagged it, and that's, I think, what had me scratching my head. The other thing too is this notion that recorders aren't being used. In my younger days, I fancied myself as not an official photographic memory, but if I heard something and wrote it down at that point, it would stick with. I mean, I could really remember a lot. It doesn't happen anymore once you have kids, but nonetheless, I was always shocked at how if I was recording something. And I really believed it was said a certain way, and when you listen to it, it's like, oh, there was an and in there and a but. I didn't know that. And so you think you can remember these things, and then the notion of waiting a beat before. I was surprised. Why not just have a recorder with you? It's backup. It's insurance if, in fact, your memory, like mine, starts failing.
I wanted to be sympathetic to Jill. When you write or speak publicly as often as she has had to do, I think there's always a little bit of a fear in the back of your mind of where did I get this idea, and was it somebody else's, and I have pulled it into my thought, and so I could say or feel that maybe that's just what she did, that this was a commonly used expression that she borrowed, but when the evidence came out and even the dashes and was so lined up, I don't know, that's carelessness at a minimum, plagiarism certainly there. I suspect it was lack of oversight, working with researchers who gave her something else, but somewhere along the way, her name is on that book, and I think she's got to own it.
Well, one of the things that her interview with Michelle Martin of NPR Michelle asked her, maybe you should have spent more on the fact-checking, since since the essence of the book is about truth and, being truthful. So I think that's an interesting point, and she agreed that, perhaps that was a place that she should have invested more into it. The bottom line is, this is her reputation. I mean, she has written with Jane Meyer I think one of the single best investigative books ever about Clarence Thomas's hearings and all the background, and that was scrupulous in the way that it was reported and recorded and all of that. So, if the issue is to talk about truth and the importance of it, and the book has these kinds of errors that strike right at what we say as journalists we try to do, which is to, check and recheck and be certain. Listen, mistakes happen, but this is not small.
Yeah, and it's too bad. I'm interviewing her next Friday for Beat the Press and reading the book. The book is very good. It's engaging. I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would. And here we are talking about mistakes instead of the substance of the book. And
well, I reviewed it for the Globe. It is pretty good,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so many problems with it that I don't really know what you do with it at this point.
I mean, it really does feel that as if there were a lot of people working on it, as you were pointing out, and portions.
I think it's too few people working on it.
Well, maybe too few, maybe senior people just bringing in a lot of information and then not going back and checking where that information came from. And I
hope there's no more.
The fact that this still happens, though.
I know.